My husband was hiding a dangerous crypto secret until his mom unlocked the wrong account. Before we begin, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these intense real-life stories. And if this grips you, give it a thumbs up and share it. Your support means everything. Now, let's get into what his mother discovered that day. My name is Sarah. I'm 37 years old, and for the past 6 years, I thought I was married to a man I understood. My husband Marcus was a software developer who worked from home, spent most of his time in his office surrounded by multiple monitors, and was brilliant with technology in ways I'd never fully comprehend. I'd accepted that his work was technical and complex, involving coding and systems I couldn't follow even when he tried to explain them. Marcus made good money. Not extraordinary money, but solid upper-middle-class income that allowed us to live comfortably in a nice suburb with our 2 kids. We had a mortgage we could afford, drove decent cars, took annual vacations. Nothing about our lifestyle suggested we had significant money problems or windfalls. Everything seemed normal, stable, exactly what you'd expect from a software developer's family. But about a year ago, I started noticing small changes in Marcus's behavior. Nothing dramatic, just subtle shifts that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern I couldn't quite identify. Marcus became more protective of his work computer. He'd always been the only one to use it, but he became almost paranoid about anyone being near it when it was unlocked. If I brought him coffee in his office, he'd minimize windows immediately. If our kids wandered in, he'd stop whatever he was doing and wait for them to leave before continuing. He changed all his passwords. Told me it was for security reasons after hearing about data breaches. But it also meant I no longer had access to accounts I'd previously been able to check if needed. Joint accounts stayed joint, but anything that was his personal login became completely locked to me. He started having more phone calls that he'd taken private. He'd see who was calling, excuse himself from dinner or family time, and go to his office with the door closed. When I asked who'd called, he'd give vague answers about work colleagues or tech contacts, never specific enough to verify, but not obviously suspicious either. His sleep patterns changed. Marcus had always been a night owl, but he started staying up later and later. I'd go to bed at 11 and wake up at 2 to find him still in his office. He'd claim he was working on projects with tight deadlines or collaborating with developers in different time zones. Explanations that made sense for someone in his field, but also felt like excuses for behavior that was becoming more extreme. And he became more stressed, more anxious, more irritable in ways that weren't typical for him. Marcus had always been calm and measured, but he started snapping at small things, getting frustrated when the internet was slow, checking his phone compulsively during family dinners, having a kind of nervous energy that suggested he was worried about something he wasn't sharing. I asked multiple times if everything was okay, if work was stressing him out, if something was bothering him that we needed to talk about. Marcus always reassured me that everything was fine, just busy with projects, just dealing with difficult clients, just the normal pressures of his job, and I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that these changes were temporary and work-related and nothing that threatened our marriage or family. But doubt kept growing, the kind of doubt that makes you feel guilty for even having it because you're supposed to trust your spouse, supposed to take their word when they say everything is fine. But every instinct was telling me that Marcus was hiding something. I just had no idea what, or how to find out without seeming like I didn't trust him. The answer came from the most unexpected source. Marcus's mother, Linda. Linda was in her early 60s, recently retired, and the kind of woman who'd raised her children before personal computers were common in homes. She'd adapted to technology as it became necessary, but was never particularly comfortable with it. She could send emails and use her smartphone for basic tasks, but anything beyond that intimidated her. Marcus was her only child, and she'd always been involved in his life. Sometimes too involved, if I'm being honest. She'd call daily, expect weekly dinners, had opinions about how we should raise our kids and manage our household. I'd learned to tolerate Linda's intrusions because Marcus was her only family, and she meant well even when she was overstepping. 3 weeks ago, Linda called and asked if she could come over to use Marcus's computer. Her laptop had crashed, and she needed to access some documents for her retirement planning. She'd tried to do it on her phone, but couldn't figure out how to navigate the website. Could she come over and use a real computer for an hour or so? Marcus was out that afternoon, meeting with a client about 40 minutes away. I called him to ask if it was okay for Linda to use his computer. He hesitated. I could hear the reluctance in his voice, but he couldn't really say no to his mother using his computer for something as innocent as retirement planning without seeming unreasonable. So he agreed, said his computer was in his office as always, said to make sure she only used the browser and didn't click on anything else, said he'd be home in about 2 hours. I let Linda into the house and showed her to Marcus's office. She thanked me, settled into his chair, and I left her to handle whatever she needed to do. Went back to folding laundry in the bedroom, helping our youngest with homework, normal afternoon activities. About 30 minutes later, I heard Linda call my name. Her voice sounded strange, tight, stressed in a way that made me immediately concerned. I went to Marcus's office and found Linda sitting at the computer, her face completely pale, her hands shaking. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Fear. Genuine, visceral fear. She asked if I knew what Marcus was doing with cryptocurrency. I told her I knew Marcus had invested some money in Bitcoin a few years ago. He'd mentioned it casually, said he'd put a few $1,000s into crypto as a speculative investment. Nothing major. Nothing that had ever seemed like a significant part of our financial picture. Linda shook her head, said that wasn't what she was talking about, said I needed to see something. Something she'd accidentally discovered while trying to access her retirement documents. She'd opened Marcus's browser, had seen several tabs already open. One of them had looked like it might be banking or financial planning, so she'd clicked on it thinking it was a helpful resource. Instead, she'd opened a cryptocurrency exchange account, an account that was logged in, active, showing real-time balances and transactions. And the numbers Linda was seeing didn't make sense. The account showed cryptocurrency holdings worth over $2 million, not $2,000, not $20,000, $2 million. An amount so far beyond what I knew Marcus to have invested that I immediately assumed there was a mistake, some kind of error in the display. But Linda started clicking through the transaction history, showing me months and months of activity, buying, selling, trading, moving cryptocurrency between accounts, using trading strategies that were clearly sophisticated and deliberate. This wasn't casual investment. This was active trading, almost like a second job Marcus had been running in secret. I sat down heavily in the other chair in the office, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to understand how Marcus could have cryptocurrency holdings worth millions of dollars when our lifestyle didn't reflect that kind of wealth. When we still had a mortgage and car payments and lived like a normal middle-class family. Linda was clicking through more of the history, and that's when she found something that made the situation exponentially worse. Messages. Within the cryptocurrency exchange platform, there was a messaging system, and Marcus had been communicating with someone who kept referencing the operation and moving product, and timing the exchanges to avoid detection. Language that didn't sound like normal investment terminology. Language that sounded distinctly illegal. Linda turned to look at me with eyes full of fear and asked again if I knew what Marcus was involved in, and I realized I didn't know at all. Didn't know that my husband had millions in cryptocurrency. Didn't know he was actively trading. Didn't know he was communicating with people about operations and avoiding detection. Didn't know anything about this massive secret life he'd been living while pretending to be a normal software developer working from home. Linda wanted to call the police immediately, was convinced Marcus was involved in something criminal. Money laundering, drug trafficking, some kind of illegal operation that explained the secret accounts and the suspicious messages. But I asked her to wait, to let me confront Marcus first, to give him a chance to explain before we jumped to conclusions that might destroy his life. Linda was reluctant, but agreed to give me 24 hours, said if I didn't have a satisfactory explanation by then, she was going to the authorities herself. I took screenshots of everything on Marcus's computer, the account balances, the transaction history, the messages, created a record of what we'd found in case we needed it later. Then Linda left, and I waited for Marcus to come home, waited to confront him with evidence that he'd been hiding something massive. Something that looked distinctly criminal, something that put our entire family at risk. Marcus arrived home around 6, cheerful and normal, asking about my day, playing with the kids, acting like everything was fine. Like he didn't have millions in cryptocurrency and suspicious messages on his computer that his wife and mother had just discovered. I waited until the kids were in bed. Then I told Marcus we needed to talk, led him to his office, showed him that his computer was still on, still showing the cryptocurrency exchange account, and I watched his face drain of color as he realized I knew. I didn't yell, didn't accuse. Just told him his mother had accidentally opened that account while trying to access her retirement documents, that we'd seen the balances and the messages, that we needed an explanation right now before his mother called the police and reported him for whatever illegal activity she was convinced he was involved in. Marcus sat down, put his head in his hands, and when he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. He said it wasn't what it looked like, that he wasn't doing anything illegal, that the money was real but earned legitimately, that he'd explain everything if I'd just listen. And for the next 3 hours, Marcus told me a story I never could have imagined. 5 years ago, Marcus had invested $3,000 in Bitcoin when it was still relatively cheap. He'd done it as a speculative bet, thinking cryptocurrency might become valuable someday, but also fully prepared to lose the entire investment. But Marcus, being a software developer, understood blockchain technology in ways most people didn't. He understood the technical mechanisms behind cryptocurrency, the trading patterns, the market psychology, and he started trading. Not gambling. Strategic trading based on technical analysis and pattern recognition. He'd spend his evenings after I went to bed studying charts, analyzing trends, making calculated trades, and he was good at it. Exceptionally good. Over 5 years, he'd turned that initial $3,000 investment into just over $2 million through careful strategic trading. Not through anything illegal. Not through insider information or market manipulation. Just through understanding the technology and the market better than most traders. The suspicious messages I'd seen weren't about drugs or money laundering. They were from other cryptocurrency traders. People Marcus had connected with through trading forums who'd developed their own language for discussing trading strategies. Moving product meant selling cryptocurrency holdings. Timing exchanges to avoid detection meant making trades during periods of high market volume so their large transactions wouldn't move the market price. It was trading jargon that sounded sinister, but was actually just technical discussion about strategy. Marcus had kept it secret because he'd been terrified. Terrified of how I'd react to knowing he'd turned a small investment into millions. Terrified I'd want to immediately change our lifestyle in ways that would attract attention. Terrified that telling people about this much money would make us targets for theft or scams. Terrified that his success was somehow fragile and might disappear if he acknowledged it too openly. So he'd lived a double life. Normal software developer during the day, secret cryptocurrency millionaire at night, maintaining our modest lifestyle while sitting on wealth that could have changed everything. And he'd convinced himself this secrecy was protecting us. That not telling me was actually a way of keeping our family safe from the complications that come with sudden wealth. I asked why he hadn't trusted me with the truth, why he'd let me think we were just a normal middle-class family while he had millions in secret accounts. Marcus said he'd been planning to tell me, that he'd been waiting for the right moment, that he'd wanted to get to a certain financial threshold where the money felt real and permanent rather than potentially temporary. That he'd been protecting me from the stress and anxiety that came with watching volatile cryptocurrency markets. Explanations that were simultaneously reasonable and completely inadequate, because regardless of his intentions, he'd lied, had hidden something fundamental about our financial situation, had made decisions about millions of dollars without consulting his wife, had created a massive secret that put him in exactly the situation he'd been trying to avoid, looking like he was involved in something illegal. I called Linda, told her Marcus wasn't doing anything criminal, that the cryptocurrency money was legitimate trading profits, that the suspicious messages were just trading jargon that sounded worse than they were. Linda was skeptical, demanded proof, demanded that Marcus show her documentation verifying that the money was legally earned and properly reported to tax authorities. Marcus spent the next 2 days pulling together every piece of evidence Linda requested. Tax returns showing declared cryptocurrency income, records of all his trades going back 5 years, documentation from the exchanges verifying his account history, Letters from the accountant he'd secretly been consulting to ensure he was complying with all cryptocurrency tax regulations. Evidence that while he'd been hiding this from me, he'd at least been smart enough not to hide it from the IRS. Linda reviewed everything, consulted with her own financial advisor, and eventually, reluctantly, accepted that Marcus had indeed made millions legitimately through cryptocurrency trading and wasn't involved in anything criminal. But she was furious about the secrecy, furious that her son had hidden this from his wife, furious that the discovery had happened the way it did, making everyone assume the worst. And she made it clear that Marcus needed to fix his marriage because she hadn't raised him to lie to his wife about millions of dollars, regardless of his reasoning. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of the strangest adjustment period imaginable. 3 weeks of looking at Marcus differently. Seeing him not just as my husband, but as someone who successfully kept a massive secret for 5 years. Someone whose double life as a cryptocurrency trader was so well hidden that I never suspected. 3 weeks of intensive couples counseling, working through the breach of trust, trying to understand why Marcus felt he couldn't tell me about the money, trying to explain why his secrecy felt like betrayal, even if his intentions were to protect rather than harm. 3 weeks of financial planning meetings, because now that the secret is out, we actually have to decide what to do with $2 million in cryptocurrency. Marcus has been reluctant to cash out large amounts, convinced the market will continue growing, but we've agreed to at least diversify, to move some wealth into more stable investments, to pay off our mortgage and create college funds for our kids, to acknowledge that we're not actually a normal middle-class family anymore, even if we're choosing to maintain a modest lifestyle. 3 weeks of explaining to Linda that while she's right to be upset about the secrecy, she also needs to respect that this is between Marcus and me, that her discovery of the account doesn't entitle her to make decisions about our finances or our marriage, that we appreciate her concern but need space to work through this ourselves. And 3 weeks of me trying to figure out how I feel about being married to a secret cryptocurrency millionaire. On one hand, Marcus genuinely wasn't doing anything illegal, wasn't having an affair, wasn't gambling away our money or putting us in debt. He was actually creating wealth through legitimate trading. On the other hand, he lied, kept a massive secret, made me think we were living paycheck to paycheck while sitting on millions, denied me the agency to participate in financial decisions that affected our entire family, treated me like I couldn't be trusted with the truth about our real financial situation. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm confused about whether his secrecy was protective or patronizing, whether his fear of telling me says more about him or about problems in our marriage that I didn't recognize, whether I can trust him going forward when he proved he could keep something this significant hidden for years. But I'm also trying to understand his perspective, trying to recognize that sudden wealth, especially wealth that exists in something as volatile and misunderstood as cryptocurrency, creates complicated psychology, that Marcus genuinely believed he was protecting us, that his intentions, however misguided the execution, weren't malicious. Our marriage isn't the same as it was before, can't be the same. We're rebuilding it on radical honesty rather than protective secrets, on shared decision-making rather than unilateral control, on trust that's been broken but might, with significant work, be repairable. The kids don't know yet. Don't know that Daddy's computer work actually made our family millionaires. Don't know that the modest lifestyle we maintain is a choice rather than a necessity. Marcus and I are still deciding how and when to tell them. How to raise children with wealth without spoiling them. How to give them opportunities money can provide while maintaining the values we want to instill. Marcus has started being more transparent about his trading, explaining what he's doing, teaching me about cryptocurrency so I can participate in decisions, showing me that the process, while complex, isn't actually mysterious or suspicious, just technical knowledge applied strategically. He's also started taking money out of cryptocurrency, slowly, strategically, but consistently, moving wealth into traditional investments, creating stability rather than keeping everything in volatile digital assets, acknowledging that his secrecy meant I couldn't advise caution even when it might have been appropriate. Linda has apologized for the way she reacted, for immediately assuming criminal activity instead of giving her son the benefit of the doubt, for letting her fear override her trust in the person she raised. But she's also made clear that this level of secrecy in a marriage is fundamentally problematic, that Marcus needed this wake-up call to understand that protecting me from information I deserved to have wasn't actually protecting me at all. And she's right. As complicated as all of this is, as much work as Marcus and I have ahead of us, the forced revelation might be the best thing that could have happened, because living with that level of secrecy was slowly poisoning our marriage. Creating distance Marcus didn't intend, but couldn't avoid when he was hiding something so fundamental. My husband was hiding a dangerous crypto secret, except it wasn't dangerous in the way Linda initially feared, wasn't illegal or immoral or evidence of criminal activity. It was dangerous because secrets that big, that significant, that all-encompassing, create fault lines in marriages, create distance between partners who are supposed to be sharing their lives completely. And if Linda hadn't accidentally clicked on that account, if we'd gone on for more years with Marcus hiding this wealth, I don't know if our marriage would have survived. Not because of what Marcus was doing, but because of the fundamental lack of trust implied by keeping it secret. We're still working through everything. Still in intensive couples therapy. Still making daily decisions about how to rebuild trust and move forward. Still figuring out who we are now that the secret is exposed. Still learning how to be a wealthy family that chooses to live modestly, rather than a modest family living within our actual means. I don't have a neat ending to offer. Don't have a conclusion about whether Marcus's secret-keeping was ultimately protective or harmful. Don't know yet if our marriage will survive this breach of trust, even though the underlying activity was legitimate. What I do know is that his mother opened the wrong account, clicked on something she wasn't supposed to see, and in doing so, forced a truth into the open that needed to be acknowledged, even though the revelation was traumatic for everyone involved. Some secrets are meant to stay hidden, but some secrets, especially in marriage, are poison, slowly contaminating everything even when they're kept with good intentions, and sometimes it takes someone clicking on the wrong account to reveal that the danger isn't what's being hidden. It's the hiding itself. The end.